was late, and the office was nearly empty as Sarah worked on a tight deadline. The silence was comforting, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. Her colleagues had long since gone home, yet the faint sound of typing echoed through the corridors. Brushing it off as her imagination, she focused on her work. But as the hours passed, the sounds grew louder, more insistent. Glancing around, she noticed a shadow flicker across the room, sending a chill down her spine. Unbeknownst to her, the office had a dark history, and she was about to uncover its secret. As Sarah continued to work, the sense of unease deepened. The typing noise grew louder, coming from a nearby cubicle. Curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to investigate. She cautiously approached the cubicle, expecting to find someone pranking her, but it was empty. The computer was off and the chair was neatly tucked in. Confused, she returned to her desk, but the typing resumed almost immediately, now accompanied by a faint whispering. Fear gnawed at her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Something was terribly wrong, and she was determined to find out what. The next night, Sarah found herself working late again, determined to meet her deadline. As the office emptied out, the familiar sounds returned. Typing, whispers, and now the faint click of a mouse. It felt as if someone was working alongside her, just out of sight. Gathering her courage, she called out, "Is anyone there?" The only response was the whispering, growing louder, more frantic. Suddenly, her computer screen flickered, and an email popped up from a colleague who had passed away months ago. The subject line read, "Help me." Trembling, she opened the email, her heart racing. The email contained a single line, "I'm still here." Terrified, Sarah tried to delete the message, but her computer froze, the screen filling with static. The whispers grew louder, surrounding her, until she could barely think. Desperate, she grabbed her things and bolted for the door, but the office seemed to close in around her. The lights flickered, and the whispers turned into a desperate cry for help. She felt a cold hand brush against her arm, and she knew she couldn't leave. Something or someone was trapped here, and it needed her help to be free. Determined to find out what was happening, Sarah dug into the office's history. She discovered that her late colleague, Mark, had been working late on a project when he collapsed at his desk. His death was sudden and unexplained, leaving behind unfinished work and an air of mystery. Since his passing, employees had reported strange occurrences late at night, but no one had connected the dots. Realizing that Mark's spirit might be trapped, Sarah knew she had to finish his work to set him free. But time was running out, and the paranormal activity was intensifying. Sarah stayed late one last time, determined to complete Mark's unfinished project. As she typed, the office fell eerily silent, the usual sounds replaced by a tense stillness. She could feel Mark's presence guiding her, urging her to finish. As she completed the final task, the room grew colder, and she heard a soft, relieved sigh. The lights flickered, and the computer screen glowed with an otherworldly light. Mark's face appeared on the screen, smiling gratefully before fading away. The whispers ceased, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. Sarah knew she had helped a lost soul find peace. The next day, the office felt different, lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. Sarah shared her experience with her colleagues, who listened in awe and disbelief. Some dismissed it as a vivid imagination, but others couldn't ignore the strange occurrences they had witnessed themselves. Though the office returned to normal, Sarah would never forget the eerie nights she spent alone, nor the sense of fulfillment she felt knowing she had helped Mark move on. The experience had changed her, leaving her with a newfound respect for the unseen forces that linger in the places we least expect. Sarah's encounter served as a reminder that the dead don't always rest in peace, especially when unfinished business ties them to the living. As she moved on from the haunting experience, she couldn't help but wonder how many other spirits lingered in the world, trapped between life and death, waiting for someone to hear their silent pleas. The office, once a place of fear, had become a place of closure and resolution. But Sarah knew that not every haunting ends so peacefully. Stay tuned for our next story, where more unsettling truths await in the most unexpected places. Ethan, a dedicated software engineer, often found himself working late into the night. The office was his second home, a place where he could focus without distractions. But one evening, as the clock struck midnight, his phone rang, jolting him from his concentration. The caller ID showed an unknown number, and curiosity led him to answer. "Hello?" he said, but all he heard was static, followed by a faint voice whispering his name. A chill ran down his spine as the voice grew louder, more insistent. It was the beginning of a night Ethan would never forget. The voice on the phone was soft and haunting, a whisper that sent shivers down Ethan's spine. It repeated his name over and over, growing more desperate with each repetition. Ethan hung up, but the phone rang again immediately. This time, the voice spoke clearly. "Help me, Ethan." The line went dead before he could respond. Confused and shaken, Ethan tried to dismiss the call as a prank, but something about the voice felt familiar. He couldn't place it, but it lingered in his mind, refusing to be ignored. He decided to investigate, unaware of the terror that awaited him. Unable to shake the feeling of dread, Ethan began searching through old company records, trying to find any clues about the mysterious caller. To his shock, he discovered that a former employee, David, had died in a tragic accident at the office several years ago. David had been working late, just like Ethan, when he fell from the roof under mysterious circumstances. The case was ruled an accident, but rumors of foul play and a haunting had circulated among the staff. Ethan's heart raced as he realized the voice on the phone might belong to David, reaching out from beyond the grave. As the night wore on, the phone calls became more frequent, each one more disturbing than the last. The voice, now unmistakably David's, pleaded for help, describing the moments leading up to his death. Ethan felt a growing sense of urgency and fear, knowing that something terrible had happened to David, something that hadn't been revealed in the official reports. The lights in the office began to flicker, and shadows danced on the walls. Ethan could feel a presence, cold and oppressive, watching his every move. He knew he had to uncover the truth, but he was running out of time. Determined to find out what really happened to David, Ethan headed to the roof, the site of the tragic accident. The air was thick with tension as he stepped onto the roof, the city lights below casting eerie shadows. As he reached the spot where David had fallen, the temperature dropped and the whispers began again, this time surrounding him. "Help me, Ethan," the voice echoed, filled with pain and desperation. Suddenly, a figure appeared before him, a ghostly apparition of David, his eyes filled with sorrow. Ethan stood frozen, unable to move as David revealed the truth. David's spirit spoke of betrayal and foul play, revealing that he had been pushed from the roof by a jealous colleague who had since left the company. His death had been covered up, leaving his soul trapped in the office, unable to move on. David begged Ethan to expose the truth, to bring justice to his untimely death. Ethan listened in horror, realizing the weight of the responsibility now on his shoulders. He promised David that he would uncover the truth and set things right. The ghostly figure nodded, slowly fading away, leaving Ethan alone on the darkened rooftop. Ethan spent the next few days digging into old files and conducting his own investigation. He uncovered evidence that corroborated David's story: emails, witness statements, and security footage that had been conveniently overlooked. Armed with this information, Ethan approached the authorities, determined to bring David's killer to justice. The case was reopened, and the truth finally came to light. The colleague responsible was arrested, and David's name was cleared. The office, once a place of dread, began to feel lighter, as if a dark cloud had been lifted. Ethan knew that David's spirit had finally found peace. Ethan could feel the difference in the office immediately. The eerie atmosphere was gone, replaced with a sense of calm. His colleagues noticed it too, though they had no idea what had transpired. Ethan chose to keep the full story to himself, knowing that not everyone would believe him. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there were other spirits out there, trapped by unfinished business, waiting for someone to hear their cries. As he returned to his work, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that he had done something truly meaningful. But he also knew that the world was full of mysteries, and this wouldn't be his last encounter with the supernatural. Lisa, a young and ambitious graphic designer, often stayed late at the office to perfect her projects. One night, as she worked alone, she noticed something strange, a recurring sound that seemed to echo through the empty halls. It wasn't the usual creaks and groans of an old building. It was more like a faint scream, barely audible, but unmistakable. Dismissing it as her imagination, Lisa tried to focus on her work, but the sound grew louder with each passing hour. Unbeknownst to her, the building had a dark past, and the scream was a cry for help from beyond the grave. The scream became a nightly occurrence, always starting at the same time, just after midnight. Lisa tried to ignore it, but the sound was impossible to block out. It wasn't just the scream itself, but the way it seemed to come from all directions, echoing through the walls and floors. One night, unable to take it anymore, Lisa decided to investigate. She followed the sound down the dimly lit corridors, her heart pounding in her chest. The scream led her to a forgotten corner of the office, an old storage room that hadn't been used in years. The door was slightly ajar, and the sound was coming from inside. Lisa hesitated at the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the handle. Pushing it open, she was met with a rush of cold air and darkness. The scream was louder now, almost deafening, but the room was empty, save for old office furniture and dusty boxes. As she stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind her, trapping her in the pitch-black room. Panic set in as the scream reached a crescendo, filling the space with an overwhelming sense of terror. Lisa fumbled for her phone, using the flashlight to illuminate the room, but there was no one there. The scream was coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Desperate for answers, Lisa began researching the building's history. She discovered that the office had once been a factory, where a tragic accident had claimed the lives of several workers. The accident had been covered up by the company, and the building was eventually repurposed into office space. The storage room where Lisa had heard the scream had once been a break room for the factory workers. It was here that the accident had occurred, trapping the victims inside as the building burned. Their screams had echoed through the halls just as they did now. Lisa realized that the spirits of the victims were still trapped, reliving their final moments. The next night, Lisa returned to the office with a plan. She brought with her a recorder, determined to capture the sound and find a way to communicate with the trapped spirits. As midnight approached, she sat in the storage room, waiting for the scream to begin. When it did, she spoke softly into the recorder, asking the spirits what they wanted. To her shock, the scream stopped abruptly, replaced by a voice, faint and distant, but unmistakably human. "Help us," the voice said, full of despair. Lisa knew she couldn't leave them like this. She had to find a way to set them free. Lisa sought help from a local paranormal expert who advised her to perform a cleansing ritual to help the spirits move on. The expert provided her with a list of items needed for the ritual: candles, sage, and a prayer to guide the spirits to the other side. That night, Lisa returned to the office, her heart heavy with both fear and determination. She set up the candles in the storage room and lit the sage, the smoke filling the air. As she recited the prayer, the temperature in the room dropped, and the screams began again, louder than ever. But this time, Lisa didn't back down. As Lisa completed the ritual, the screams intensified, reaching a fever pitch. The air was thick with the presence of the trapped spirits, their pain and fear palpable. But slowly, the screams began to fade, replaced by a sense of calm. The candles flickered, and the room grew warmer. Lisa felt a gentle breeze, as if the spirits were finally leaving, moving on to a place where they could find peace. The storage room, once a place of terror, was now quiet. The spirits had been set free, their suffering finally over. Lisa knew that she had done the right thing, even if it had cost her a few sleepless nights. In the days that followed, the office returned to normal. The strange occurrences ceased, and the building felt lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. Lisa continued her work, but she could never forget the screams she had heard or the spirits she had helped. The experience had changed her, making her more aware of the unseen forces that linger in the world. As she packed up her things one evening, she heard a faint voice, not a scream, but a whisper of gratitude. "Thank you," it said, and Lisa smiled, knowing that the spirits were finally at peace.